Primary elections begin today. The conflict in Iran and immigration enforcement, and America's talking. This is the Center Square Daily for Tuesday, March 3rd, 2026. I'm your host, Greg Bishop. It's primary election day in Arkansas, North Carolina, and Texas. In North Carolina, early in-person voting ended Saturday. And today finishes the 51-day voting window for that state. Polls close at 7:30 p.m. in North Carolina time. And winners advancing to the U.S. Senate race expected to be known quickly. Some of the most recognized are Roy Cooper for Democrats and Michael Whatley for Republicans. Two other congressional primaries are also garnering attention. The redrawn 1st congressional district race between 5 Republicans and the 4th congressional district race for Democrats. Voter registrations were net changed downward for overall and for each of the major voting blocks in North Carolina, according to Saturday's update from the State Board of Elections. A big question in any election, not just who wins, but what is voter turnout? So clearly, be watching thecentersquare.com for the latest there. In Texas, one of the most contentious races is for U.S. Senate, where 2 Republicans are challenging incumbent U.S. Senator John Cornyn, Attorney General Ken Paxton, and U.S. Representative Wesley Hunt. Now, Paxton, he's been embroiled in legal battles stemming from allegations related to his impeachment by the Texas House, which was led by Republicans. His current and former staff are still embroiled in lawsuits. And Paxton's also lost conservative group endorsements who've cited marital infidelity as a top reason. Hunt has come under heavy criticism for missing almost a quarter of floor House votes last year. During the campaign season in January, Hunt missed nearly all floor votes. Cornyn's voting record in support of Trump policies surpasses 90%, and he's received the most endorsements from Texas leaders, business, law enforcement, and other groups, and he's also the incumbent. But with those 3 candidates in Texas, there could be a need for a runoff election, which in Texas is scheduled May 26th. It's not just seats in Congress that are up for grabs. In states across the country throughout this election year, state house seats are also possibly contended. In Texas, 3 Democrats and 4 Republicans are running statewide for state comptroller, and all 150 House districts in the Texas House of Representatives are up for election for a 2-year term. 16 state Senate seats in Texas are up for a 4-year term. Arkansas joins North Carolina and Texas in their primary elections today. All 3 also have runoff dates scheduled later on. Next week, Mississippi voters take to the polls. The following week, Illinois voters cast votes. May is also a busy primary month with Indiana, Ohio, Nebraska, West Virginia, Louisiana, Alabama, Georgia, Idaho, Kentucky, Oregon, and Pennsylvania. Some of those states also have runoff elections scheduled after the primary election. So that's just a handful of states. Now, the other states going to be voting in their primaries in the months after. But the latest, the very last state to have a primary election before November 3rd is Delaware, which is scheduled September 15th. Each state may fall into a certain category of a primary, and this is important for voters to know, either an open primary, a closed primary, or a semi-closed primary. In closed primaries, only registered party members are allowed to vote. In semi-closed primaries, registered party members and unaffiliated voters are allowed to cast ballots. And in open primaries, all voters are allowed to vote. For today's elections, North Carolina is a semi-closed primary state. Texas and Arkansas are open primary states. One of the big issues facing taxpayers is the ongoing cost of policies around immigration enforcement. And as a partial federal government shutdown continues impacting agencies like the TSA and the Coast Guard, a former border security official, he says Democrats holding money up at a time that the military is having operations against Iran, they need to drop their demands and approve funding for DHS. And now for the Center Square Daily, let's talk with Mark Morgan. He is the former commissioner of the U.S. Customs and Border Protection under the first Trump administration, and he joins us now. Mark, thanks for taking time. Obviously, Just about a week ago, it felt like a lot of focus on continued border enforcement and the debate going on in Congress about how to possibly regulate ICE when it comes to masks or body cameras. But how things can change in just short order. Now we've got the ongoing conflict with Iran and the local public safety impacts of that. Thanks for taking time with us. As a former Customs and Border Protection officer, what can you tell us about the thinking of public safety concerns with what's going on over in Iran?
Well, let's be clear. We've been saying this since day one. If you look back historically, whether it's a Democratic or a Republican administration, what's so frustrating with me, we've generally agreed upon the fact that border security is synonymous with national security. Right? This isn't overly complicated. This is really about common sense and logic and reality, and that we have to know who and what is coming across our borders. And if we don't, that jeopardizes our national security. And look, I don't want to play politics here, but if you look at just the past, 4 years of the Biden administration and the 12 to 14 million illegal aliens that were allowed in this country, vast majority of them unchecked, unvetted, meaning we had no idea what their backgrounds were or what their allegiance was. Common sense will tell you that poses a national security threat. We reported countless times during that past 4 years about the illegal aliens that come from countries that we know sponsor, harbor, and facilitate terrorism. And wait for it, countries like Lebanon and Iran. I mean, it's just ridiculous to me that we're still having this conversation. And I've been saying for a very long time, it's not if or when a terrorism threat has come across our borders. To me, it's already here. I mean, the FBI, I also spent 20 years in the FBI. One of the most troubling and challenging things for the FBI are the unknown elements, the homegrown violent extremists that are here. And if we're importing them, I've said for a long time as well, those sleeper cells, it's not if or when they come. I think they're already here.
And I think that's something that we should probably continue to elevate, because while the Trump administration 2.0, you were part of Trump administration 1.0, but this new Trump administration really did clamp down on the border. Even as early as Monday, he's again talking about how the border is completely secure. But that doesn't negate the past 4 years under the Biden administration. How pervasive was it when you were with the first Trump administration, when you would see red flags raised of, well, we've got somebody that's suspected to be from a terrorist organization who crossed the border illegally? How prevalent was that?
Well, first of all, let's just look at the numbers. And right, this is a numbers game. And again, I'll go back to common sense. If you're able to reduce the flow of illegal migration, then you're obviously going to reduce the flow of those threats coming in. And when I was commissioner there under Trump 1, we had reduced those numbers to an all-time historic low. And when that happens, when you reduce the flow, again, common sense will tell you is that you get to put more resources, more rank and file back on the front lines to stand a fighting chance to stop those threats from actually illegally entering our country. And while I say Trump 2.0 has reverted back to that almost overnight, the border still has a ways to go. We still need additional infrastructure. We still need additional resources there to stop the flow of illegal migration that's coming, because the cartels are alive and well, and they haven't stopped their human smuggling efforts 100%. So that's on the border security side. But on the immigration side, on the interior enforcement side, this is critically important. And that's why a group of conservative think tanks, both nationally and statewide, have gotten together to form the coalition of mass deportations. And the really crux behind this group coming together is to not only support, but also show our solidarity and President Trump's promise to the American people to remove every single illegal alien that's here. And this is critical, because if we're going to put integrity back in the system, the system of the package of immigration laws that Congress passed, and to stop the future flow of illegal immigration, we have to hold everyone accountable who's violated those laws. We can't selectively enforce those laws based on our personal ideology or politics. And to your point, what we see in the first year, what this coalition is calling phase one, is that's what President Trump has done. He's really focused the majority of efforts on those illegal aliens that have committed additional crimes and the national security threat. And look, there's no doubt that our country is safer because of it. But we still have a long ways to go. And ultimately, not only do we need to continue to prioritize going after the worst national security threats, but to be fully successful, we've got to expand beyond just that subset, what we're calling phase two. We need to go after the 1.5 million illegal aliens that have an order of removal from a judge, or the hundreds of thousands of visa overstays, or the 2 million gotaways that Biden let in that avoided our system completely, that we know nothing about. And we have to go after American employers who knowingly and willingly are hiring illegal aliens. That's the only way that we're going to be able to send a message to the entire world that illegal immigration is not going to be tolerated. And so until we do both that, secure the border and enforce the laws of those who are in the country illegally, we're never going to be fully successful.
Talking with Mark Morgan. He is the former commissioner for U.S. Customs and Border Protection under the first Trump administration. And obviously a lot of focus is on border protection, especially with what's going on in Iran. How important does what happened in Iran over the weekend increase the importance of local law enforcement in states like California, New York, Illinois, Minnesota? Does what's going on overseas increase the importance of these local law enforcement organizations to cooperate with federal authorities, unlike what we've seen since Trump took office?
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen this since day one. And the one thing, if we've learned anything from 9/11, which unfortunately I have to say a lot of people have forgotten about how we got to 9/11. And part of the issues with 9/11, if you look at the 9/11, you study the commission report, was just to your point. Your point is spot on. There was a lack of coordination across all U.S. governments, from state, local, and federal agencies. There was a lack of sharing information between those agencies. That's why the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force, that's how it began. Every single one of the 56 FBI offices has their own independent Joint Terrorism Task Force, of which, who belongs to that? Every state and local agency and other federal agency you can imagine, as it should be. For us to be totally successful from a law enforcement community, both state, local, feds, across the board, we have to come together and work the threats from a whole of government approach. That's why I truly believe we've been so successful on the terrorism front. And that's why we have to continue to do this, including on the illegal alien side. Again, we've let countless, and there's so many we don't know, individuals into our country illegally, again, that come from countries that we know sponsor, harbor, and facilitate terrorism. So if we're not cooperating from every law enforcement agency throughout the United States with regards to those that are in a country illegally that come from countries like that, then we're not doing our job to the American people.
Mark, as we talk, we're still in a partial government shutdown, right? You've got TSA, you've got Secret Service, you've got the Coast Guard not getting paychecks with the increased efforts of public safety, considering what's going on overseas. But it looks like Democrats still insistent on bringing about certain types of regulations for border protection and immigration and customs enforcement. How realistic, as somebody who comes from the law enforcement space, how realistic are those concerns and those demands, and do you see them getting any wins out of Republicans in Congress?
Well, the things that they're focused on, I hope not. Look, we could always, here's something that should not be negotiable. We should not negotiate on enforcing the laws that Congress passed. Our constitutional republic is based on a couple of founding elements. One is the rule of law, but the other one is the separate but three co-equal branches of government. And if the laws passed by one branch, the legislative branch, if those laws can be selectively enforced and looked at as nothing more than a mere guideline by the executive branch, then we're not serving our constitutional republic. We're actually giving more power to one branch than the other. That was not the founding principles of our founding document. That's number one. Number two is that we can have an intellectual discussion on how we enforce the laws, right? Not whether we're going to enforce them or not. That's the crux of the Democratic platform. They don't want to have honest discussions about how we can get better enforcing the laws. They want us to not enforce the laws. I mean, the recent polls, and look, I take polls, with a grain of salt, a lot of them, but we've got polls where it just asks basic questions like, should you remove an illegal alien that has committed additional crime. And we still have a significant portion of Democrats that say no. We've got Democrats that part of what they're saying is to abolish ICE or to put operational curtails on ICE as a whole as an organization. Those things we just cannot do. We cannot have Congress dictate how components are going to operationalize enforcing the law. It's something as simple as a mask. Look, I don't like the look of masks. I don't like that. I don't think the average American, regardless of your politics, actually likes that look. But here's why it's necessary. Because we have individuals out there that are doxing these agents. They're putting their home addresses online that are attacking these agents. I mean, assaults on the ICE agents have increased by 3,000%. That just cannot be tolerated. So I think right now what they're focusing on, it's not legitimate. And we need to get back to funding DHS and really addressing these threats that we're talking about right now.
Mark Morgan, former commissioner of U.S. Customs and Border Protection under the first Trump administration. Greatly appreciate you taking the time. We'll have to connect again soon on these issues for the Center Square Daily. Now it's time for America's Talking, with headlines from across the country that you can find at thecentersquare.com. Lawmakers requesting the Department of Justice probe whether Somali fraud is linked to ICE protests. This coming from Therese Boudreau, saying the Department of Justice is being asked to investigate this situation. Attorney General Pam Bondi receiving that letter from Republican lawmakers where they ask to see if it exists. There's an organized effort to obstruct law enforcement with foreign influence and criminal activities, including fraud. Now, that request for a DOJ briefing follows President Donald Trump's previous comments that the Minnesota Somali fraud scandal is at least partially responsible for the violent organized protests going on in the streets. An estimated $9 billion in welfare fraud was uncovered in October, and by December, nearly 100 people, including 85 Somali immigrants, faced criminal charges, with dozens pleading guilty. A number of U.S. representatives like to be driven around in style, according to the latest story from investigative unit's Mark Strickers. He says lawmakers are billing taxpayers for limousine service. An investigation from the Center Square found 6 representatives charging taxpayers nearly $30,000 to hire chauffeured limousines in the latest 12 months, for which figures are available. Since January 2019, U.S. representatives spent more than $160,000 out of their office accounts with companies that would have the word limo or limousine in their name, according to data compiled by the Center Square. The largest user of that service, Maxine Waters, a California U.S. representative. The Democrat spent the most on limo services. She charged taxpayers over $25,000 for transportation from Limousine House LLC, according to House distribution reports. Spokesperson didn't immediately return comment to the Center Square. Since 2019, Waters has spent 6 figures on limo services, $111,000. The records do not indicate the type of vehicle, if it was a town car or an Escalade or a stretch limousine. The Center Square education reporter Esther Wickham reports academic achievement in the U.S. looks to be falling behind pre-pandemic levels. National test data showing a persistent decline in math and reading scores years after the COVID-19 pandemic. Test results from the National Center for Education Statistics show the average scores of 12th grade math and reading assessments dropped 3 points from 2019. Among 4th graders, average math scores were also 3 points lower than before the pandemic, while 8th graders saw math scores decline by 8 points over 5 years. Reading scores for 4th and 8th graders dropped 5 points between 2019 and 2024. The Center Square investigative reporter T.J. Martinell reports the U.S. Supreme Court Monday ruling in favor of plaintiffs in a lawsuit against a California law allowing public schools to conceal a student's gender transitions from their parents. The policy, the Supreme Court said, likely violates First and 14th Amendments. The lawsuit filed by the Thomas More Society in 2023 when 2 Escondido teachers sued the Escondido Unified School District in San Diego County, the California Department of Education, and Attorney General Rob Bonta after they were denied religious accommodations from school policies that require staff to use students' preferred pronouns upon request. However, it was also required the teachers withhold information about a child's gender identity from parents. In its 6-3 ruling, the Supreme Court's majority opinion concluded the state argues that the policies advance a compelling interest in student safety and privacy, but those policies cut out the primary protectors of the children's best interest, their parents. The Supreme Court went on to say the parents who objected to the California policies on free exchange grounds are likely to succeed on the merits. And finally, New York climate law could cost consumers there $4,000 more a year. The Center Square contributor Chris Wade reports a new analysis suggesting New York's yet to be implemented climate change law would dramatically drive up costs for consumers, and it's fueling demands for the proposed mandates to be scrapped. A memo by the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority estimates greenhouse gas emissions cap and investment requirements of the 2019 Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, which is pending action by Democratic Governor Kathy Hochul, would cost the state's energy consumers an average of $2,300 to $4,000 more a year. And that's just some of the top stories you'll find at thecentersquare.com. From my studios in Central Illinois, I'm Greg Bishop, and join us back here Wednesday for more stories impacting you, the taxpayer, from around the country, only with the Center Square Daily.